welcome back for Proverbs 25. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for joining us today. We're doing Proverbs 25 verses 1 through 14. Sorry I missed you yesterday. It was Labor Day here in the States, and we had a very busy day, so I did not get one out yesterday, but we are here for the rest of this week. It should be Tuesday through Friday. We'll go ahead and get started. As usual, likes and shares are appreciated. The comments and questions in the section below, all of that is appreciated. Lets me know you're here. If you've got any questions, be glad to try to answer those if I can, or help you find an answer. If you've got any suggestions for future books, we'll be glad to look at that as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Proverbs 25, we'll just do verse 1 to start with. These are the Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah, copied. So we see here that there's another section. I looked into some of the commentaries on this, and it's believed that this section, chapter 25 and following, was basically added on to the section that Solomon wrote and dictated as, this, we talked previously about the Proverbs being a letter to his sons. So it's believed that the, chapter 25 and following are not part of that letter that he had written to his sons, but they are, but it is a collection of Proverbs that someone else added later. And it says here that the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah, copied, and so we're not really sure if this was under Solomon's direction or if it was added later after his death, or what the case may have been. But we do know that they are Proverbs of Solomon, and that they were just copied down at a different time. So it's not necessarily part of the letter that he wrote to his sons, but there's still a lot of good stuff to be learned and to be had. So we'll continue on as such. Verse 2, it is the glory of God to conceal things, but the glory of kings to search things out. So this points out kind of God's nature. He doesn't necessarily make everything simple and straightforward, and I believe that's on purpose. I think, if everything made sense to us, we wouldn't need faith, and we wouldn't need to search out knowledge and search out wisdom. But kind of part of his nature is to hide some things from us, and for us to search it out. And you'll see these next few verses refer to kings. Obviously, I'm not a king. You were probably not a king. But these things are still applicable. I think part of being a king is searching out wisdom and seeking wisdom. And I think that's something we should all do. And so this is kind of in that vein. So anyway, we see that it's God's nature to hide things and to make things harder to figure out, and that it's our job as those who try to seek wisdom to search them out and to figure that out. And in verse 3, as the heavens for height and the earth for depth, so the heart of a king is unsearchable. So, again, as we are seeking wisdom, there shouldn't be an end to that. There's not a point at which we will say, hey, I've got enough wisdom, I know enough. I think part of our seeking of wisdom is knowing that we'll never be done seeking wisdom. And not to say that it's something that stresses us out or causes a tension within us, but it's just a constant seeking. It's a joy to try to seek out wisdom and learn things, and so it should never stop. It's just there shouldn't be an end to it. And then 4 and 5, take away the dross from the silver, and the smith has a material for a vessel. Take away the wicked from the presence of a king, and his throne will be established in righteousness. So silver was one of the materials that they worked with in this day. I don't think it was quite as precious as it is today, but it was still a precious metal. But whenever they would find silver in its ore, there there was always dross or other materials mixed in with it. So what they would do is they would heat it up, and the silver would separate from the dross, and they would try to pull the dross off of the silver obviously without losing any of the silver. And so a couple things is that it's comparing the wickedness in our lives to that dross, that it's something that has to be drawn out, something that has to be worked out. And a couple things I wanted to point out is that this process involved heat. It wasn't, if silver had some type of feeling component, it would not have been comfortable. And so the removing of wickedness from our life is not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be something that's easy for us. And it was also, if I'm remembering this process correctly, and somebody can feel free to search it out and send me the link, or write it out in the comment section, whatever you figure out here. But I believe it was a multi-step process, right? So they would heat up the silver, they would remove the dross, and then they would have to heat it up again and do the same thing. And it wasn't a one and done type process. As it is in our lives, the wickedness that is being removed from our lives, it's not like we can go and repent and ask forgiveness, and then we don't struggle with temptation anymore. It's a multi-step process, and it takes heat, it takes pressure, it takes time for us to work out and to purify ourselves. That's ultimately the goal. 6 and 7, do not put yourself forward in the king's presence or stand in the place of a great. It is better to be told, come up here, than to be put lower in the presence of a noble. And then what your eyes have seen starts, I think it starts the sentence for verse 8, so we'll come back and grab that in a second. So basically it's saying to, humble yourselves obviously it's talking about in the presence of a king, so the idea in this day is that, at a king's table or in a king's court, it was always divided by class, and so the highest class people would be in a certain spot, and I'm assuming that's probably closer to the king, and the lower class people would be further away. And so what it's saying here is that when you're in that situation, always put yourself lower than you think you might be, because it's better to be told to move up, and that you are of a higher, class than you think you are, rather than being told, hey, you shouldn't be here, go back there. And so, the applicability of that to our situation is always to, humble yourselves, put yourself in a place of a servant, as Jesus demonstrated, because it's better to be told, you should be in a higher position than you are, rather than being saying, how did you get in this position, or you really shouldn't be in this place of honor. And that's heard, by the people around you, and that has credit and has weight for those that are there. And so we shouldn't be humble in order to be honored, but I think just in general, and the theme of Proverbs is that we should be humble, period. And that it may lead to honor, it may lead to blessing, but in general, just be humble, period. And then 8 through 10, and like I said, I'm going to go back and grab the very first, last phrase of verse 7. If you are not following along, this probably doesn't make sense, but just keep your eyes on the road, keep it between the lines. What your eyes have seen, do not hastily bring into court, for what will you do in the end when your neighbor puts you to shame? Argue your case with your neighbor himself, and do not reveal another's secret, lest he who hears you bring shame upon you, and your ill repute will have no end. So basically, if you catch, or if you see your neighbor or someone doing something that you think is wrong or inconsistent with your character, or whatever the case may be, instead of running to a public place or a public venue to air that out, this suggests going to your neighbor first and having a conversation with them. Figure out if what you saw is what you thought you saw. If in fact what's going on is something that should be addressed, etc. Before you just run into, in this case, a court to witness against them until you run into a public sphere to blast them or whatever the case may be. So obviously this is extremely applicable today with the social media that we have, and that you quickly have an audience with, in some cases up to, thousands and thousands of people, and you may not know what you're talking about. So be careful to cast judgment, especially in a public sphere, because when and if you're found out, or it becomes it's proven to be untrue, you're the one carrying that shame, and you're the one whose ill repute will have no end, as verse 10 says. So in today's culture, I think this is extremely applicable to search things out before you go to a public sphere with them. We'll go on with verse 11, and 11, 12, 13, and 14. I'll just do one verse at a time. They kind of tie together, but they're also a little different as well. So verse 11, word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver. So I tried to look up this word to see if there was any significance to it. It's sometimes translated as advice. It's just a word, it's a statement, or just words that are fitly spoken. So words that fit the situation, words of wisdom, we would assume, but the words that someone needed to hear at the time, those are like apples of gold in a setting of silver. So it's ornamental, it's beautiful, it's valuable. It's valuable to the person that hears it. Verse 12, like a gold ring or an ornament of gold is a wise reprover to the listening ear. So we've talked about how, we should reprove the wise and basically not waste the time on a fool, at other parts in Proverbs. And so this is saying that wise reproof to a listening ear, to someone who's willing to receive it, is like a gold ring or an ornament of gold. It's a status symbol. It's valuable again. And so, I think this is true on both ends. So if you're ever in the situation where you are that wise reprover, know that it's a value to the people that you're talking to. It's not always comfortable to be a reprover. It's not always comfortable to be the one to offer correction or offer guidance, but it is valuable and useful to the person you offer it to. And then if someone is giving you reproof, know that's valuable, and it's a status symbol that they care enough about you to put themselves in that awkward situation. Verse 13, like the cold of snow in the time of harvest is a faithful messenger to those who send him. He refreshes the soul of his masters. So, as it's getting harvest time in an agricultural society, it's starting to cool down, and you've been working the field all summer. You've been pulling weeds and tending, making sure that your crop's coming forth, and then there's the harvest. And as the harvest comes out, it's starting to cool down, and it's a great refreshment. And so in this day, a lot of important messages were passed through messengers, and that messenger could really, whether by mistake or intended, just being a liar, or having some type of motive behind it, could change a message between point A and point B and really change the outcome. And so having a messenger that you could trust, that you knew whatever message you said was going to be passed through to the other side clearly and concisely, and wasn't going to be messed with in the process, was invaluable, was refreshing. And so, our job as messengers of Christ, it's, we are to be that messenger that communicates what he's told us and what he's shown us in the scriptures to those that need to hear it. Verse 14, like clouds and wind without rain is a man who boasts of a gift that he does not give. So, obviously in an agrarian or agricultural society, rain was a big deal. And so clouds would blow in, and people could get excited that it was going to rain and their crops were going to be watered. And if if clouds would blow in and then blow out without having produced anything, it was kind of a disappointment, or even a major disappointment, depending on how dire the times were. So it's comparing that situation to a man who boasts of a gift that he does not give. A guy that says, "Hey, I'm going to bring you this, or I'm going to give you this, or I'm going to do this thing for you and for your benefit," and then he never delivers. The takeaway from that is obviously don't be that guy. If you make a promise, deliver on it. If you promise a gift, deliver the gift. Always be a person of your word. Always be one who people can count on, even if it's in your nature, as it's in my nature to be forgetful and to let stuff slip and fall to the wayside or whatever. Make it a point that if you tell someone you're going to do something, to be there to do that, to give that, whatever the case may be. All right, so we will pick up tomorrow with verse 15. Thanks again for being here. Questions or comments in the section below. Likes and shares are always appreciated. Thanks. Have a great day.